Today we've got rock star LaTonya Wilkins in the house. Cannot wait for this conversation. She's a best-selling author. She is the maestro with all things culture, leadership, team, globally. We are so lucky to have you today, sister. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love your vibe, so I'm really excited for this.
Well, this is the positive and cool kid and chief encouragement officer only club, baby. So you must
Okay.
be all right if you're with us.
Yeah, I love it.
Hey, there's a lot of good nuggets with you.
Mhm.
This is the Best Self podcast. So we do talk about a lot of stuff, best self. And best self also means, it's an inside out thing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
great leadership is also love-based leadership and soul-based leadership. And I'd heard you talk about feeling othered
Mhm.
uh, previously. And man, I just think that's gold. And you have a story to that. I'm sure you have multiple stories on when you first felt like you were othered. Could you kind of run us through that? What does it mean to be othered? And can you kind of just make us feel maybe what you were
Yeah.
feeling when you first felt othered?
Yeah. It started at a really young age, and I write about this in my book. I tell a story that is still placated in my head decades later. But as a child, I grew up in Iowa, small town Iowa, of all places. And I was the only Black kid in my elementary school. Um, and it was, I didn't really know what that meant. I was just
Right.
kind of going through preschool was fine. I didn't really, there were other kids that they weren't necessarily Black. I think there's one other Black kid. But when I got into elementary school, it was different. And there was one kid who made me see that I was an other. And what happened, I was actually coloring a picture. We're doing some watercolors and some crayons and all kinds of things in kindergarten. And I wanted to color the hair, and I colored the hair like yellow. And she told me I couldn't do that. She said, "You cannot do that. You are Black. You are dark. You cannot color this hair.
Right.
That does not look like you." And that was the first time. I was like 5 years old, and I was like, wow, I'm an other. And
Mm.
as I went through life, I was like, there are other identities that I was othered on. And
Right.
and so it just became a part of my life. Sometimes it was more difficult than others. But yeah, that's that whole concept. And I talk about how that also happens in organizations all the time,
Oh, yeah.
where there's like a core group and then there's the other group.
Right. That's a powerful story. I wholeheartedly agree. And man, I mean, we had you and I probably had different. We had different upbringings. I didn't always feel othered in the same way. I wasn't always a high self-esteem guy, um, but I've always been Caucasian, so I can't pretend to know what it's like to be your type of other, as you were labeled or felt starting at a young age. For other people that feel othered out there, right now, a lot of people are, fried between the ears for
Mhm.
a bunch of different reasons. To have this on top of those other things has to be just feel like that's the world just clamping down on their shoulder. How can someone else become the best version of themselves internally? What are some steps they could take if you're speaking to them right now on the other
Yeah.
side of this screen or the other side of this whatever? How can they become the best version of them, feeling like other?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. It's not like it's not a very prescriptive formula. I
Mhm.
could share kind of like my messy process, which I think if you can even take just a couple nuggets from this
Mhm.
and then self-author your own, I think that would be great. But yeah, so my life, I went through like grade school. My parents divorced. I had to move to another town. I fit in there. I didn't fit in there even more. So it was not good.
Right.
Um, And I high school was okay. You know, I started being okay. Um, and then I think college was good. I kind of found myself. And then after that, I would say in my early to mid 20s, like everybody has, you have this crisis, went back to business school. And then I went and worked for corporations, and I like large corporations, and I was hiding my a lot of myself.
Right.
And I think what happened is I realized that hiding myself was actually not making me move forward any quicker. I was thinking that, hey, if I just hide parts of myself, or hey, if I just try to blend in and assimilate, it's going to be great.
Right.
You know, I would hear all these people say cliche things like, oh, you know, people will remember you if you're different. And I just never believed that. But that is like really true.
Yeah,
That is really
sure.
true. It
Yeah.
is really true. But the caveat is that you have to be comfortable with who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's when I would say I kind of was forced into it. I had a role at a large company, and um, one day I was doing great. The next day, it just seemed like they wanted me out, even though they didn't say that. It just
Mm.
felt that way.
Right.
My all of my champions had left.
Mm.
Um, and so I think it was just the new regime, and they just wanted me out. And I was devastated because
Mm.
everybody that I had done work for that wasn't in my boss hierarchy
Right.
loved me. And so that's what I let myself just do some soul searching. I usually, up to that point, Brad, I was always like, okay, I don't like this job. This job doesn't want me. I don't want it. So I'm going to find a new job. But this time I took some time to kind of just be in the pit and just
Uh-huh.
say,
Ooh.
gosh, I am not fitting in, and I can't live like this. Like, I was getting to a point in my life where I was like, I don't want to just go to the next corporation, be the next cog in the wheel,
Right.
and not be able to bring half of myself to work. So I would say that if you're trying to embark on that journey, you really have to have a pit moment. And I
Wow.
call those pit moments. And
Ooh.
they're not easy. But you have to honestly do it. You have to honestly go into that pit. And even early on, when I was doing career coaching, um, that was one of the areas that my clients struggled with the most. They would come to me and they would say, I just need a new job. Can you just update my LinkedIn? It
Right.
doesn't work that way.
Right.
Like, if you don't want to replicate all the old things following you around, you really have to have those pit moments.
Right. So we're not trying to avoid friction, we're embracing friction.
Right, right.
Yeah, I love it. I talk about the same thing too. We can visit Pity City, but we don't want to stay there. But
No.
but it is required for sure. You've talked about how your grandma played a role in your life.
Yeah, yep.
But let's talk about G Money. Let's talk about grandma.
Yeah, I am very fortunate in that way. And as you can see over the years, I've been able to actually have gratitude for the things that are amazing in my life that a lot of people don't have and I take for granted. I
Right.
think it's easy for us to focus on the things that we don't have. But I was very fortunate in that I had my grandma till 93. Her mother lived till almost 100, and her sisters lived until they're well into their 90s as well. So
Wow.
I always had these matriarchs that were around, and I didn't always love everything they said to me. But my grandma, she was probably one of the ones that was, you know, one of the funniest, like one of the one of the ones that only one that lived in Iowa. So she was a
Ah,
little bit different,
okay.
right? Everybody else lived in Chicago.
Mm.
And she migrated to the north because she was fleeing Jim Crow laws, because
Gotcha.
my mother didn't want to drink from a colored fountain. And she was just always a light. She was a cafeteria worker for many decades. And whenever I would get stressed about anything in the world, she always topped me. She always had something that she was just like, hey, you didn't go through this, you didn't go through this. It's a cycle of humanity. And she actually was the person that inspired me to write my book, my first book, because she was really good with building relationships with people who are different from her, real relationships.
Love,
And I learned that from her. And I was just
love it.
like, I had to take a step back and say, wow, this world, like when I look at the world and I look at all these companies trying to do diversity and inclusion, and it's stupid, like the
Yeah.
way that they're doing it. And I knew I had a voice I needed to add in this area, not just that, but just around culture and how we build relationships with people different. And so she was that light that actually helped me get there, and see that. And so when we celebrated her life, it's crazy. I started writing my book like a month or two later, and the book is
Mhm.
not even chronicled just around her. I mean, I have some stories about her, but it really was the catalyst to kind of bring everything together in my
I
life up to that point.
love it. Man, I could just listen to you for 25 minutes. You've got a
Thank you.
good vibe, sister. I should
Oh,
just
thank
like,
you.
maybe
Thank
we
you.
just
Yeah, I
cut
try.
off my screen and just let it be the Wilkins show. Uh, so you were talking about your book. Uh, like to talk about a couple things with that. So you're a best-selling author. Very cool. When you become a, do you believe that everyone has it in the tank to be a best-selling author? Do you believe everyone has a story?
I do think everybody has a story. Do I think everybody needs to write a book? No. I mean, I think we live in this world that says everybody has to do everything. Like everybody has to get a master's degree, everybody has to get a bachelor's degree, everybody has to start a business. No, I mean, there's different things for different people. And I do think everybody has a story. And I think it's, how do you tell your story? You have to tell your story or else someone else will. So I think that's, how do you live your story? How do you tell your story? Like, what did you learn from your story? And that's what's important, right? I think the world lives under a lot of pressure where people just want to get on social media and go viral, or they
Right.
just want instant gratification. And I
Mm,
will tell you that my success was far from instant gratification. It's actually still in progress,
absolutely.
like building. And so I sometimes we look outside looking in, or and we think, oh, this person has it all together. I could do that same thing. I can replicate that. But I have scars and bruises that
Yep.
you just don't have, and that's okay. And so I think yeah. Do I think everybody has a story? Yes. Do I think everyone could be a best-selling author if you want to? Yeah. But don't feel pressured like you have to do that. There are so many other ways to tell your story.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking like there's people out there that don't they have the I'm not good enough syndrome
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they sit on their hands and they don't say anything. So they believe that they're not influencing anybody, but we're always influencing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you and me and we sitting on our hands and not telling our story or not trying to go out and serve anybody doesn't do our community any service.
Right.
And
No.
so, yeah, I generally a lot of people don't tell their story because they don't feel like their story is interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
there's always somebody out there that needs to hear our story
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or needs our influence, even if it's the person sitting there flying solo that you're walking past, or maybe it's the little kid next to the cash register when you're checking out in a grocery store, and your part of your story could be, a lot of your story is gratification, and or what's the word I'm looking for? Not seeking gratification, but you're grateful. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd imagine that when you're at a restaurant, you're always super cool with the waitress or the waiter, and you're always super friendly. Well, there's a 7-year-old on the table next to you that just saw how you were treating them, and
Mm-hmm.
now you're having influence. So we can give
I
our
love
story in a
that.
lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying, because like I run couple writing groups,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them, like I'm the only person that's written a book in that group, but everybody else writes amazing stuff.
Right.
And there's a couple people that are kind of, they want to move in that direction. And to your point, Brad, it's like, where do they tell their stories? Like, because they're afraid. Well, there's a lot of storytelling groups. I mean, they just started off with storytelling groups. They shared it with all of us. Um, but just start with that. If you're afraid, um, the world's opening back up, it looks like,
Yeah.
but there's so many places to go. And just to be able to tell your story, ranging from Toastmasters to
Yeah.
more local groups. But yeah, I think starting there, that's how I started. I actually, on a whim, I was still working in corporate, and I was like, there's a Disrupt HR Chicago in my city, and I kind of adjacently knew the person that started it, and so I said, hey, I'd like to speak. And that was probably my first real speaking gig. Like, I
Nice.
think, yeah, that was like real, like
Right.
business type.
You initiated it. I love it. Yeah, I kind of alluded to earlier, but when I was really young, I was a low self-esteem guy. I wasn't always a speaker. I wasn't always running a podcast or writing books or anything like that. I was a low self-esteem dude, and it took me going to Pity City. It took me being at lower moments, and then it took me investing in me, betting on me. And I've heard you talk about being the architect of your own, not in these exact words, but being the architect of your own awesome.
Mhm.
Uh, are there any tips you can give people on how they can become the architect of their own abnormally Wilkins beastly awesome?
Yeah, the first is the pit. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about that. The second step, I would say, is um, just being like, screw it, and bringing your whole self everywhere. Like
Yeah.
that was the that was when my world changed. When I would go after I was in the pit, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I would just go into job interviews and I'd talk to people and I'd bring my whole self to that conversation. So that would be the second. And I would say the third is um, to pursue something you think you can't do, but you want to do, right?
Oh, I
Like,
like
and it
that.
could be like I wanted to write a book. Um, I kind of went back and forth. I wasn't that kind of person where I was like, oh my gosh, like I will be a failure if I don't. But
Right.
I never thought I could. And then COVID occurred, and I was like, well, I'm sitting here, and um, I could probably find a way to, write this, because I was, working remotely.
Sure.
Like, so I don't strongly recommend that, because I basically was working all the time.
Right.
But yeah, try to do something that you're afraid of, especially after you've been in the pit and you start to see what you really want.
Yeah. I find I feel like self-awareness, getting real with yourself, is something that's really helped me. Like being real, and because self-awareness allows us to get clarity, and clarity allows us to expand, which kind of
Mhm.
alludes to a lot of the stuff you've been talking about. Like when we can start expanding from the inside
Right.
out,
Right.
now we start to become freaking abnormally awesome. And the cool part about, at least for me, maybe you can, I'm sure you can relate, uh, is that the more I've invested in me, the more everything outside of me has gotten better. Like the more I've invested in myself, the better my world outside of my body has gotten. Like it, I think a lot of teachers, a lot of healthcare workers, a lot of people that are servant leaders are struggling right now
Mhm.
because they're fried, because
Yes.
they're so used, their thing, a lot of them, I'm generalizing, a lot of them their entire life they've just served others. That's been
Mhm.
their juice. Like their juice is people, and they want to help people and all this stuff. And man, they're getting really fried. And I think what a lot of them do is they're not filling up their own cup. They're filling up everyone else's cup, but they're not filling up their
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
cup. Do you have, it feels like we've kind of already touched on it a little bit. I was just trying, before we hopped on today, I was brainstorming ways too that I could help people fill up their cup. Some ways that they could
Yeah.
fill up their cup. Maybe we can brainstorm a couple ways that people could fill up
Yeah.
their own cup today, maybe? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good, interesting concept. And I think a couple of the ways that I was able to do that, again, it wasn't easy peasy writing a book.
Right.
I don't make it sound like that. I pursued more just professional training for myself,
Yeah.
stuff that I wanted to do. I took some somatic coaching classes, some team coaching classes. You may think that sounds like work. It wasn't. It was basically just something that, yeah, I need it for my PCC, but it was also something that I took as fun. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to do. I started during in 2020. I adjusted my sleep schedule, and I started becoming an early riser. It was something that I knew that I wanted to do, and I knew that that was basically my circadian rhythm. Like I was observing those, and so now that I'm an early riser, I make time for myself every morning, and
Right.
I go to the gym
Yeah.
most days of the week. Then after the gym, I might, so like, especially now, I might pop by a coffee shop just for an hour and just do a
Hmm.
little writing. But having time for yourself every day.
So important.
The third thing about filling your cup is, and this is a newer thing for me because it's hard even for people like me that have been doing this stuff for a long time.
Sure.
Um, I just started traveling and just taking trips. Like I took a trip, by myself, um, like a couple weeks ago, and I went to a uh, women's travel conference, and we talked about traveling around the world. And I mean, it wasn't an industry conference; it was more of a, like a hobby kind of
Sure.
conference.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so it was like it was leisure travel, and so it was just really nice. I went to New Orleans, and I,
Mm.
ate a lot of food there, and
Yeah.
I met some new people, and so those are just a few things that I do. And it's
Right.
I was afraid to take a trip by myself because I'd never done it. Like
Right.
I'm usually traveling with my family or my partner or
Right.
whatever. And so I think that those are some ways that I've done it. Like again, do something you're afraid to do. Like I was almost not going to take this trip because a friend of mine couldn't go. And I was like, I think I'm just going to go.
Yep.
And but
Nice.
yeah, just I think that every decade it's different, and you the different things fill your cup more than others as
Sure.
life progresses.
Yeah, I think we just got to get intentional about it.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you're having fun by design going to Louisiana. Uh, we gotta have family by design, fun by design,
Right. I love that. Yeah.
personal development by design. I love that you're setting boundaries. It feels like you're setting more boundaries. You're getting intentional with your schedule, all that stuff. I feel like that helps fill up our cup because when we're more, I'm not, for me, I call it having core values held loosely. Like
Mhm.
this is who I am. This is my greatness radius. But inside that, I'm going to roam freely. But we got to have some sort of parameters. And I think when we give ourselves a little more design, it eliminates stress and eliminates the fluff in our life because we're not just shooting from the hip. Like people that don't have a plan, they're just treating their life like a hobby. And when you treat your life like a hobby, you kind of get what you deserve, and you're just stuck in the pit. You're singing in the mud
Right.
type deal.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, the
well,
intentions are so important. And
right,
one more thing I'll say is
yeah,
like,
I get it.
there's no way I would have written a book if I didn't have those boundaries and intentions. Like, if I wasn't going to the gym and working out or running, like when I couldn't go to the gym, um, I mean, that was the way that I cleared my head and kept going and just connected with my humanness again.
Mm,
And so it's whatever that is for you. Even it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to
right.
be. It might just be going on a walk in the morning or meditation or yeah. But you have to have that.
Love it. You are gold, girlfriend. Uh, so hey, we've got 30 to 45 seconds left before I kick you to the curb, Wilkins.
Okay.
Uh, and so for 30 to 45 seconds, uh, at the time of this recording, we've got 60 plus countries tuning into LaTonya Nation over there. Where, where, how could someone create the best version of themselves? You got for 30 to 45 seconds, how would you suggest the people, the audience, how should they start becoming the best version of themselves today?
List out 5 things you've always wanted to do, but you're afraid of, and just pick one and do that. Do it. Just do it. Do it immediately, and reflect on the experience and how it makes you feel. That's the closing comment I have.
I love it. You were great. I so appreciate you taking the time today to hang out
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah, you too.
You're a person I could talk with. I know I would become a much better version of me if I got 15 minutes of Wilkinson Nation in my diet. Wilkinson Nation in my diet every day. It'd
Yeah.
be good. Um, so I hope you have an incredible day, friend. And
You too.
make it
Yeah.
anytime you need anything. Uh, we'll make sure we put all your socials and all that stuff in the notes. If for those that are out there that are, man, she works with teams, she does culture, she does leadership. She is a best-selling author. Her book is incredible. She's she's available. She's not really hard to get a hold of. If you like what you heard today, please reach out to her. She is a rock star and has so much to give. So I appreciate you being with us today, sister. Make it a great day.
Okay, you too, Brad.